All right, guys, let's get started. I feel like a lot of people will be late today because of the weather. But we have plenty of stuff to cover, so no. All right, how are we feeling, except for the shitty weather? So today I'm going to start with something I forgot to talk about last Monday, because we're Wednesday, right? Yes, Wednesday. Which is class functions. Pretty easy concept to get, so I don't expect us to spend more than 25 minutes on it. And then today is going to be a little bit all over the place, but all fun and important, necessary things. We're going to talk a little bit more about object-oriented programming in general, but we're not going to keep focusing on this because everything we will be doing in the coming weeks will be object-oriented. So just by moving on, we'll get to practices. And then we're going to talk about arrays, which is really powerful. A little bit of introduction to arrays. We're going to do more arrays and dictionaries on Monday next week. We're also going to talk about table views, which is very exciting because they are essential to iOS. For instance, think about your list of messages in your iOS SMS messages app. Think about your contacts. Think about even the settings app is completely a table view. So we're going to talk about that today. And I think that's most of it. Let's see. So arrays, I'm going to talk again about gestures. I don't really get it, but we're going to talk again about them briefly. We already talked about them a little bit, also very briefly, so together we'll be all about gestures. We're going to talk about segues a little bit more and presenting views programmatically. We're going to do view controllers again, which is something we've been doing for a while now. And then what is the last one? View controllers. I don't know if we're going to get to that or how this will fit in here, but sure. So so something we've been missing, like a big piece that's been missing so far, is that we are not passing data around in any of our applications. All the data stays at this moment. Also, sorry, I'm their feature, my feet are wet. So, so we've been keeping data in one view controller or in one class, and we've been getting it out of the class every now and then. For instance, with the map class and the calculator, it returns a result, and we put it on screen in the view controller. So we're passing some data, but very limited. And this present views programmatically, and a little bit more of segs is going to get us started. But the real stuff is going to get started next week. So I looked, and delegates is not going to be for another week. I know we talked about protocols on Monday very briefly, which is a good introduction to delegates, but we're not going to be talking about delegates yet. But I think starting next week, we're going to be passing data forwards. There's like two streams of data in iOS, forward, backwards. So and forward is the easiest one. So we're going to start talking about that next week. So today is going to be all over the place, but hopefully all fun things. So let's just recap what we did on Wednesday last week and Monday. We were talking about object-oriented programming. Can anybody tell me what the difference is between a class and an object? Without reading this. This is on the screen. Let's start with a class. What is a class? What does a class do for us? Or how have we been using classes? Because classes are a lot of things, but how have we been using them in?
So like wrap up a bunch of functionality and call it something.
Correct. So to gather together functions and variables. So you can look at them like some kind of blueprint for an object. Because what is an object? Can anybody? We've been object instance was the same thing. We remember this slide where it said object equals instance. Do we know what an object or an instance is? So an instance is when we do var Bella equals cow. When we instantiate our class, that's an object. So cow is the class, and then when we instantiate it, it's an instance or an object. So we'll be using these a lot. So classes can inherit functions and behavior and state from parent classes, which are defined as superclass. Here are some like quick examples of classes that Apple gives us, but we've been creating our own classes, like the math class that they add, minus, multiply, and division. So you can create your own classes, and that we'll be doing that a lot too over the next weeks. So what are the advantages of object-oriented programming? Does anyone know what encapsulation meant? We already briefly got mentioned today too. When we encapsulate all of our relevant methods and variables together. So that's encapsulation. Inheritance, what are the two? So we have a superclass and a, exactly. So one is a superclass to the subclass, and the superclass has many subclasses. But how many superclasses can a class have?
How many superclasses?
Yeah, only one, correct. So for instance, cow can inherit from animal, but it can't inherit from like animal and then something else. So only one.
So and over there, is Bella technically the object or the whole thing?
No, so Bella is the object. That's a good question. So basically all of this is our object. That's when we instantiate our cow. So object, instance, I feel like instance is almost a more logical word, but we'll be seeing a lot of the documentation talks about objects. So, and that's also a good one. So if something is on a class, and what does that mean? For instance, if you have a function that says func walk animal, which takes an animal, what can we pass in here? Can we pass? So this is a class animal. Can we pass in our Bella? So let me type it out. Actually, maybe it will ring a bell. I need to clean up my desktop because it's getting really messy. So let's say we have a function. I'm just going to create an empty placeholder so it doesn't yell at me. But let's say we have a function walk animal. Oops, no. So animal, type animal. We have a cow, which is a subclass of animal. What can we all pass into walk animal? Can we pass in our cow, or can we only pass in our animal?
You should be able to do cow.
Exactly. Because of the inheritance, cow is just an animal, just as so you can pass in an instance of a cow or an instance of an animal. So both would work because cow inherits from animal, which is really powerful. There's no real reason to restrict this to be type cow if it's not necessary, because if you remember what this function did on Monday was we had a walk function on here that just did walk. Then we used to do animal.walk, but we can pass in both. So let Bella equals cow, and let I don't know, dinosaur. I don't know how you spell dinosaur. Is that correct? So we can do walk animal, and we can pass in both. I mean, not at the same time, but both Bella or cow have a walk function as the dinosaur type animal, because this walk function behind the scenes just gets not copied, but it's available on the cow too, because its superclass is a type animal.
So cow always has all the features.
Exactly. So if we, for instance, have a name here on animal, just do an empty string for now, we can do Bella.name equals Bella. Just because Bella is a cow, and all the properties and methods are automatically available on cow because its superclass is
So
animal.
if we alter just one method from animal in cow, then cow's not a subclass of animal.
Can you say that again?
So say we already inherited cow from animal,
Mm-hmm.
and if we alter something in cow, for example, one trait changes from what it inherited,
Mhm.
it's not a subclass.
Well, it is because so it gets everything from animal, but we, for instance, can add stuff to the cow. For instance, give. No, you cannot take away stuff from animal. So you need to think like very carefully about what you put in the superclass. The superclass, for instance, in this case, is pretty clear. Should only have, and this is actually not really true, right? Because let's say we have, well, birds can technically walk, I guess, but let's say we create fish. Fish cannot walk. So you have to be very careful with what you put in animal. You only want to put relevant functions and properties in there that will also make sense when they get inherited in subclasses.
So all we needed to do to make that a subclass was just do cow : animal.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the only thing we need to do. We say we created class cow, and it's a type, or it's not a type, but it's a superclass. It's superclasses.
But I thought last time didn't you have to do like a super init or something to make sure?
That is when we have custom initializers, but in this case we do not. And the reason why we do not is because name gets a default value. So let's say we do this though, we don't give it a default value. Our compiler is going to start yelling at us. It's going to say we need an init function. So you would do you remember the syntax for an init function?
init.
Then?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And what do we want to get in our init function?
Name.
Yeah?
Name.
Yeah, exactly, because right now our name doesn't have any value yet. So then we do cell.name equals name, correct. So when we create our animal, this becomes redundant because we can now pass it into the initializer. So cow name Bella. I'm just gonna, so our dinosaur was an animal. I'm just gonna pretend that my cat isn't a dinosaur. Also add in some returns here so you guys can see it easier. And increase my font size. Oh, it's already increased, cool. So there's still no super in it though, right? And does anyone know why? We don't have a super in it, or so there's no initializers in cow, right? At any like it gets this one because when we create a cow, we need to pass in its name. But why don't we have any initializers in here? Because last time we used to see super in it stuff, right? Can anyone guess? So the question is, why is there no new initializer, I would say, in cow? Because last time we used to have the super init, and we had to initialize the animal. The reason why is do you know, David?
I'm not 100% certain.
All right. So the reason why is because when we create cow, we have all the information we needed. Cow doesn't have any new variables that animal didn't have. So this initializer satisfies the compiler because the only unknown piece of information right now is name, which is defined on animal. And this is a subclass of animal, so we can use the same initializer as animal. Now, when would we need a initializer is when our cow had an extra piece of information that was missing. For instance, moo? Like this? Moo? With an H? Moo. Type string, let's go with that. I like it. So right now it's going to say, well, you created this move variable and you didn't, you don't have an initializer for it, right? So it can fix it for you by assigning a default value, which is probably not what we want. So we need to create an initializer again, and we will need a name too, and whatever moo means. And so now we can do self.moo equals moo. But we need to, let's take a look. So let's update this. So cow will use a new initializer now. So our cow's name was Bella. Fumu. No clue what I'm doing. So, okay. What we did is we passed in both variables right now. We have the name and the moo. And so we set cell.moo equals moo. But we didn't update its name yet. So we're now using this initializer. So our cow doesn't have a name yet. So Xcode is going to yell at us, and it's going to say, well, you didn't call super init, which actually what it's trying to say is this variable didn't get its contents, and you need to use this. So this is where our thing comes in. What do we do to initialize our superclass? So now we call the initializer on its superclass, and this is where we pass in our name. And so what happens when we create a cow, we use this initializer. So we create a cow from scratch, and we pass in a name and a moo. Moo is only defined, or is only relevant in the cow class. So we do self.moo equals moo, but then we don't have a name yet, and the superclass has not been initialized. So we need to do super.init and pass in the name.
But if we didn't have our own move variable that we added, then it would have automatically made name.
Yes, because then we would have gone through this initializer and name would have been set, and nothing new was happening in cow.
So basically, it just gets confused when you have additional ones, so you have to make.
It's not about confused. It needs to have an initial value for it when you create one. So if you create something that is not an optional, or not, when you don't give it like an empty string or a default value, you need to fill it out. The compiler needs to have a value for it on the initialization. So if you created this moo string type, it didn't have any, we needed it to be initialized when we create a cow, so we have an init function, but we also need to call the super init if it's a subclass.
To let it know that, to let it know where you're initializing it from.
Yes. We're going to be using this quite a lot in the coming weeks, so this will hopefully become a lot clearer too. Also, the super init thing, I don't know if we're going to be using that so often, but it's good to know what it means because it is in a lot of code. If there's no more questions about this, I will move on to class functions. Any questions about these two classes, the instantiating of the two? Also, this should be obvious, but so on Bella, we can change moo equals, but our dinosaur doesn't have a moo variable, right? Because we defined that moo variable on cow. Make sense? All right.
You can post this.
Yeah, I'll post these. Let's talk about class variables. I meant to talk about this, or class functions, sorry. Class functions / class methods, same thing. So what are these? We've actually been using one of them without really knowing it. And it was in the form of this. So it prints it out on the right here. But so we haven't really done this ourselves, right? This starts with a capital, so this means a class. And then we call a function on it. But we don't have to do let color equals UI color and then color.yellow color. So the way we've been writing our functions, it would look like this. Let color of type UI color and then color.yellow color, where yellow color, oops, in UI color would return a UI color and then it would do like return yellow or something, right? This is how we've been doing it. Think about the string representation on our animal when we had the cat with its name, right? We had to create the cat or the animal first, set its type and name, and then we had a function, string representation or something, and it returned a string, and that's what we returned in the function. So this is how we've been doing our function call so far. But so this is something odd, right? We never instantiate it. We never do let color equals UI color and then call a function on it. So that is what class methods are. And they're very easy to define. So for instance, when we take a look at, let's create one on our animal. Let's create a function description, and it returns a string. This is a living animal. So for instance, on Bella, how do we call this function? So, oops, no, not print it, return it. How would we call this? On our cow, for instance. So this function over here.
We want to call it on Bella or on?
Yeah, on Bella.
Do we need to admit in the outcome?
No.
Bella dot description.
Yeah, exactly. So Bella dot description. So this will print it out. This is a living animal on the right. So that's what we've been doing last week too, right? With our animal class that returned the name and the species of it. Now, in this case, this is not a special case, but this doesn't rely on any information from the class itself, right? It just returns this is a living animal, no matter what the name of the animal is or anything else we define on it. So we could create a class function out of this just by prepending it with a class keyword. And then this will yell at us, but you can do animal.description. So you don't need to initialize it anymore, which is really, really nice. So for instance, the UI color example I have right here, it's a great example because yellow color doesn't depend on any state. A yellow color will always be yellow color. The description of an animal is always going to be, this is a living animal. So, but what is the catch here? I cannot do this is a living animal with name, because this is a class function. It doesn't need to be initialized, so name doesn't have a value necessarily. This is more for a description is a great example. So instance member name cannot be used on type animal because we're in a class function. So when we look at the UI color implementation from Apple, let's see if we can find it. See these? So they have class function black color, class function dark gray color, class function light gray color, class function white color. And the reason why they can do that is because the only thing UI color actually is a, let's do, for instance, class. This is a dumb example, but default animal color will also return a UI color. And this is a dumb example because not all animals are the same color, but a yellow color is always going to be yellow color, and a red color is always be red color. But you create a UI color by doing this. So you give it a red, green, and blue. So for instance, this is based on a scale from 0 to 1, and that's calculated by, for instance, doing 255, 200 divided by 255. So it's when you open up a designer's program, color values are based red, green, and blue, a value between 0 and 255. You just map that to a number between 0 and 1. So that is what this is. So 230. And alpha is 1. We don't want it to be transparent. So now we can do, probably going to be the ugliest color ever. Default animal color. There you go. Oh, it's not that bad. So does this make sense somehow? A class function is really useful because you don't need to initialize the class. You can just call it on the class name itself. The only downside of it, you cannot rely on any state within the class. So you cannot call other functions. You cannot use variables that are declared on top. You can do a bunch of stuff in here, but you cannot rely on anything that is up here. You could use other class functions though. This is getting maybe a little bit too crazy. I'm not going to show that. But so the only thing you basically need to know is a class function is prepended with the class keyword and can return something, or print something, which would be a little bit less useful. But most of the time, it's going to return something, but it cannot rely on state from the class itself. Because if I delete all of this code, well, I'm not going to delete it, but comment it out about her like Bella and Animal, and so I just created the two classes, right? I never created an instance or object from them. I can still do Animal capitalized description, which is really nice. I don't need to do let animal equals animal parentheses and then animal dot description.
Are there any primary use cases or problem sets that you normally do that with that you think of?
Yes, definitely. But let me think for a good one. But I use it a lot. For instance, a good one is, we didn't talk about arrays yet, but let's say an array holds just a set of data, right? It could be 3 elements, but it could be 3,000 elements. You could have a utilities class, and you could have a class function on it that returns a random element out of an array. And you pass it in the array, and it returns the random element. So actually, we can already almost write this if we ignore the array stuff. So class utilities, so class func get random item from array. You pass it the array you want to get the random item off. I'm gonna, for now, just assume that's all strings, so from string array. The syntax for array, which we're gonna talk about later, is just in between square brackets, and the only thing this is gonna do is return a random string out of the array. So let's say this is our data that we're passing in, foo, bar, Andre, Tomas, Jean, is that how you spell it? Yes. Right? So you would pass in this like list of data almost into this function, and if you wanted to return a random element to you, which is really nice. So okay, let's start the Google game again. Swift random number random element from array. Never remember this one. There's a lot of conversion happening. So there we go, random index. So this creates a number. So let's say you pass in foobar, Andre, Tomas, Jing, and May, which is 6 elements. This is going to create a random number between 0 and 5, which is all elements, right? 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to create a random number. So we can just do, and how do you access number in array? This will make more sense at the end of the class, but we can do array random index. So this just generates a random number, in this case between 0 and 5, and it's going to insert this random number to access that object from the array. So the first time this might be, let's actually do it to show it to you. So you could do utilities dot get random string from array, and I'm going to create my array first. Names equals true bar Andre. Oops. Aging. So I'm going to pass in my names. I'm going to copy this a bunch of times. So what does this do? We create a class that we never instantiate because this little function doesn't rely on any state. It doesn't like rely on extra variables. We have none at the moment. So what does it do? We pass it a string of arrays, an array of strings. String of arrays is not even the thing. An array of strings which are just a indefinite, like it's not a set amount of strings. I could pass in 1,000 here. And what it does is it creates a random number between 0 and the length of the array -1. Why -1? We're going to talk about that tonight. But so basically it's either creating 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in this case. And then this line, all it does is it takes that random number it just created out of the array and returns it to us. So for instance, instead of doing this, if you want to like do this in 7 places in your code, instead of doing that in 7 places, these 2 lines or this like line that you have to remember, you can create a class utilities and do this. Another one that I can show you already, because colors, we talked about them a little bit now, and I use this one actually a lot. Get random color, which takes returns as a UI color, and I actually have a snippet for it in my. Nope, that's Objective-C. Swift random color, return color. So all this does is, let's do it, utilities, copy it a bunch of times. Oops. Greatest thing ever. For instance, why do I use this so many times? Not because I like my UIs to be like disco balls, but I don't have it up here. Busted. Working on a little side project. Actually, I actually have this like this same function, random color, right here. So for instance, it's a really good example, and it's like a real thing I use a lot. So instead of having these 6 lines of code all over my code, I have it in one place, and instead of having to create an instance of a utilities every time, I can just make it a class function, and I never have to instantiate it. Okay. So, for instance, I use this for debugging purposes to see where all my views start and end. So if I do this, this is in like real MVP stage. There's no design yet, so we just wanted to create a proof of concept. But see the random background colors? It works great just to see that it actually looks the way I want it to look. So a little example where class functions are really useful. Just to illustrate the difference one more time, you could do, so class another utilities, which doesn't make any sense, and then do func get random color, right? And you just return a UI color too. You copy this code basically because that doesn't change. Oh, there's no parentheses. But if you wanted to use this one, you needed to do another utilities equals another utilities and then another utilities dot get random color, which will get you the exact same thing, but it's just annoying that you have to do these like 2 lines for no reason. Because the only reason why I can make this a class function is because it doesn't rely on any state, no matter what. Like a random color is a random color. It doesn't matter if I would have a variable in here called name or something, that doesn't change anything. A random color stays a random color, so I can avoid these 2 lines of code. That's the difference between the 2. Does that make sense? Are they going to save your life at some point? Probably not, but it's a nice little thing to have and to know.
Keep it down a little bit.
Cool? All right. And now you guys will do coding. So I recreated the shitty game that we didn't really cover much last Monday. I rewrote it completely with structs and arrays. We're not going to use the game classes itself right now. I will go over them though, but you will be using them. So you don't have to write them yourself, but you'll have to instantiate them and do things with them. So I'm going to show you what the starter project looks like. So we're going to pull from GitHub together, and I'm going to show you, well, I was going to show you what the end result should look like, but I have a funny thing. I rewrote it, or I modified it a little bit just before class, so I didn't update the final results. But it will be very similar. So let's first take a look at the starter project. So if you open up your GitHub app, so it looks like I have no changes, which is great. If you do, just write a message, do commit to master, sync it up, and then do update from GA students. Also guys, if you still have questions about Git stuff, I really want you to ask them, because Git is going to be with us for the coming 12, well not 12, I don't know how far we are in 3 weeks. So 9 more weeks. It's really important.
Rest of your life.
I don't mind explaining it again, really from scratch. If this stopped making sense over the past 3 weeks, the same the update from GA students now. Who wants me to explain that one more time?
Well, I think at a certain point, I'd like to do more on the actual like GitHub website, so that like some people are like, oh yeah, do a pull request, like do that.
Yes.
Or maybe that's an office hours thing. But
That's going to be probably a workshop thing. I don't really have any given time to go over those things. Pull requests are also really like useful when you start working together with other people, but not so much when you're working by yourself. But we can definitely talk about Git more. I'm happy to schedule a workshop that talks about command line Git, because I'm not using this shit anymore. It's not necessary on the weekend. About command line Git and more GitHub stuff on a Saturday and or Sunday, if anyone would be interested in that. Right, so I discovered today that one of my best friends is out of town in March, so I'm going to do it that weekend. And I will let you know what date it is. And I'm going to create a doodle for, such a funny word, doodle, for Saturday and Sunday, and then depending on when most people can attend, I'll do it that day. All right. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, happy to explain it again on the blackboard or the whiteboard with like lines and the circles. Anyway, if this worked, you should have a, so iOS DC5 lesson 7 game starter project. Who doesn't have that? Yell at me if you haven't figured it out and you don't have it. But if you have, open it up and hit the play button, which is not going to do a lot for us right now. Yeah.
have anything in the main story?
I changed your width to compact any, by the way, because otherwise you might not see a lot. Raise your hand if you have this open and ready to go, so I have some kind of.
Yeah, it's not letting me actually run it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's nothing in the code files. Okay, you're not the first one. Oh, you can just change it here. So if you try to play your code or run it and you get some kind of like weird thing pop down, I don't know what it says. Go to make sure you selected a simulator here. Maybe this also was you, probably.
I don't know.
It doesn't.
You need to lower the point of target or update your Xcode. So basically update your Xcode.
But you can't do it.
So
you don't see
this
that.
Xcode, which I've been using, already goes to 9.2, which is what I had, and you don't have 9.2 yet, so it doesn't allow you. So just change it to 9, and update Xcode to 9. So if you see this being generic iOS device, that's not going to do much. So you need to change it to a simulator, the one of your choice. So if you run this, this is useless. It doesn't do anything. So it comes to a welcome screen that says that you need to press the continue button to continue, but the continue button doesn't do anything, which is problematic. So you guys will be fixing that amongst a couple of other things. So continue doesn't do anything. So let's take a look at our storyboard. This is the main game view controller, where you will enter a good player's name and a bad player's name. And when you click Start Game, it should go to this view controller when the bad player won, or to this view controller when the good player won. Now it should present these modally. Now we know with modal view controllers you're stuck. So this gone button is for later in this class. You're going to be stuck right now when this view controller appears, which is fine. So let me show you what the end project looked like. But so I don't have this like welcome screen. I immediately go into this one, but use your imagination, stitch the two together, and that's what you should have after the class. And I might go over some of the game classes with you guys first, because the solution is in solutions, but if you just want to copy it, be my guest, but that's not really going to help you with anything. But so if you run it, what needs to happen is, there we go. So, okay, what's up? No, I don't know why I did that. Okay, so I can't have two projects that are the same. I don't know, that's from a work thing. That's already there, don't worry about AppDelegate. No, oh, this is also my personal project. I just showed you guys with the emojis. And I lost it, great. Game. All right, work. So if you haven't noticed yet, if you have 4 projects open and you run one project on an iPhone 6 and the other one on an iPhone 6 Plus, it tends to get a little bit crazy and it would crash on you. So I think, I'm not really sure, I made this Monday night, but I think if I don't enter any names, it should yell at me. Okay, no, it doesn't. That's interesting. It should yell at you in the solution. But what needs to happen is this now the final one? Yes. So if I enter in, for instance, Tomas and Andre, and I click Start Game, it says that Andre won today. And so it logs a bunch of information out, which I already did for you guys, so you don't need to worry about that. But so each player starts with 100, and so it's the same thing, right? So good player just did a damage of 29 to bad player, with their attack hyper voice. I researched Pokemons, and I copied their attacks. So bad player is left with 71 health. So then this third switch, and it's bad player's turn. So bad player just did a damage of 8 to good player with the attack low kick. And so good player has 92 left. And then good player gets to attack again, 18 with a rollout. So bad player only has 53 left. So right now it's 92-53. But bad player gets to attack again. And he does 33, which is quite a lot, with a karate chop. So good player is left, and so on, right? And so it ends with the fact that bad player just did damage of 14 to good player. So good player was winning in the beginning, but the things turned around. So bad player did 14 to good player with a cross chop, which I imagine is something like that. So good player is left with -2 health. It's really sad, which results in bad player 1. Now, Also, this is not really purple. I don't know why it is purple on the projector, but it's pretty red, I think. That doesn't matter. So all the game classes are in here. Quickly gonna go over them. So we have a base player class. So held to 100 string. Also is a string, right? Name is a string. We keep track of who is a good player and bad player with a boolean is good. And so this is arrays again, so don't worry about that. But we have a set of attacks which is empty. In the general player, you'll see where we use them in a little bit. So when you create a basic player, what you won't do is just name and is good. We have the same function again, is alive, which will return true or false if the health is more than 100. And we have perform random attack, which gets called every turn because it's a random attack that gets chosen. So again, same thing like I did with random names. It generates a random number and returns the attack. Now, what is attack? Let's talk about attack first. Well, that's our beloved struct. So I created a struct attack, gave it a name and a damage, and I create these in good player and bad player. So I did my research. So each player has 3 attacks. So the first attack for good player, second attack, third attack. And then I just set its attacks, which it gets from the super class, from player, to be an array of first attack, second attack, third attack. Don't worry about any of this. You won't be interfacing with the players directly except for the initialization, with giving them a name, and good or bad. So you'd be using this initializer, basically. And then what you are very interested in is the match. So when you create a match, it takes a good player and bad player. So when you instantiate a match, just like you did with a cow, it takes a good player and bad player, and then you will call a function on its start match, which does all this printing to the console. And then there's a function on it, winner, which returns good player or bad player. And so your task will exist out of, so I'm going to give steps about for this, right? Because I am very much aware that this is suddenly a pretty large project with a lot of classes. But, so the first thing you'll do is very easy. So 1, welcome goes to right? So we in the starter project, you have a welcome screen with a continue button. The first thing that should happen is when you click continue, it goes to this screen. The second thing is connect. I don't know why I sometimes spell my N's as M's. It's a strange thing. I never write. Connect text fields plus buttons. So for this screen, you need to connect them to your view controller, and when you click start game, you need to have an ID action that allows you to create the game, and you need to have access to good player and bad player's name text fields, so you can create your players. When that happens, I'm actually going to type this. You're not going to be able to read this. First, connect continue button on welcome screen to game PC, which might be called view controller in your guys' project. I don't know. So hook up UI text fields plus UI button, and get values out of text fields. Start with just printing them to the console, right? Use a guard statement. You don't need to do any error handling, but if they're empty, they should not allow to start the game, which is something I forgot. But you guys are here to make my stuff even better. So the third thing that should happen is, which is basically under here, create 2 players, a good player and a bad player, and pass them the names from text fields. Create a match with the good player, bad player initializer. start the match, get the winner from the match, show the right modal, and then on who won. So you should be thinking already sets here, right? Showing modals, connecting view controllers, present only, segues. So this is how you need to approach this. So your view controller file or game view controller, I don't know how I called it in your guys' project, is empty. You'll be doing all of this in that file and in your storyboards. So can somebody confirm the name to me? Is it view controller or game view controller? All goes into game view controller in combination with storyboard segues.
Well, actually, the file is called game view controller, or view controller, but the class.
Yes, okay, so, but the class is also already hooked up to the storyboard, so you should be able to, that's really bad of me. So you should be able to start dragging outlets and actions. Let's say 30 minutes, because I know this is a lot of work, but actually it's only gonna be 15-ish lines of code, honestly. It's really not that bad. The hard work's been done for you. This is a good exercise in reading my code and figuring out how I implemented it. But I'm here to ask questions, but please try really hard first. Read classes through again that I created for you, and work together. Perfect, there's 6 of us. You two, and you two, right? Get really close. Not too close, of course, but close.
Me? No. I will know.
Today was the day for what? Interviews?
Yeah, I just came from HC all the way out in Rockville.
I didn't know.
How'd it go?
Oh my goodness, I did coach on this. Simple.
You fixed it?
Yeah,
That's good, man.
I mean, it wasn't anything crazy.
You want to work there, though?
Yeah.
That's good. That's also the first time I hear you say that.
Yeah, I let the other job expire today. So, but then I got this other one at Gannett. But then when we do like QA stuff, so that's when I was doing like
They wanted you to do what?
QA.
Oh,
All that.
So you want to spend like 5 or 10 minutes
Automation?
finding that?
Testing, yes.
that's testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we recently hired our first like pure test engineer. I think there's good money in that, man. Nobody wants to do that shit.
No one wants to do it. Even while I was doing it, it's just like, could I?
Feel
I mean,
like-
it was kind of fun, but it was only fun
I
because
think
had to
if
build
you're
it.
passionate about it, dude, like it's the greatest job ever. You make shitload of money for something you like doing.
Yeah.
I honestly think the salaries are like 30% higher than a normal developer because just they don't find anyone. We looked for over 8 months for someone we liked.
And
We
then-
also didn't want to hire like a 70-year-old that like has been done like testing for like the past 20 years because that wouldn't fit in. So we're picky, but still, it's hard to find someone.
Yeah, and they said like a lot of their good testers ended up getting moved over to the product team. So it's like, yeah, that's initially where I thought they were going to place me, but then they're like, no, we need you on
The
the
UI
testing team. So, all right, whatever. Same.
When do you find out?
So I sent them my code. They, with them, we're gonna go over the code tomorrow sometime.
Okay.
And then the HZ, they were supposed to go over it with me, but I had to run to get my money from the train station.
Gotcha.
I mean, the other guy, the other developer went through it with me. He's like, it was cool. So, yeah. It was ugly. Like I couldn't do any CSS stuff because I had to go early. I was so mad.
Oh,
Essentially, it's like Bitly, URL shortener.
Gotcha.
So I had to. It was either I make a full stack app or I take a PSD and do all the stuff.
Yeah.
So I went full stack. It's Express, Node, Mongo, and then I didn't
Nice,
do
man.
anything on the front end.
You have your code open? Is it code up? Looks good, man.
This is it, right? This is where you
I actually never worked with Mongoose or Mongo at all.
Really?
Yeah.
It's really nice. I like it.
We've been using Postgres a lot lately, which
I
is
use Postgres.
what is the
with
difference?
Rails. So Postgres is a more traditional relational database. Mongo is a NoSQL database.
gotcha. Looks pretty good. How long do you get for it?
I don't even know how long I was there. I started like one day, but then I was just like Googling and reading stuff because I was like, I have no idea how to make
Yeah.
this. And then I found this tutorial that, have you heard of Redis?
Redis?
Redis.
Yeah. I've started working with it for the first time
That's
this
another
week.
database, right?
No, but it's a caching. So, from what I understand, no expert started with it actually for the first time on Monday, so 2 days ago. But it's something that is in between your database and your server.
Mhm.
So, when, for instance, you go to this, for instance, in this example, you look up a short link, right? Somebody clicked on a short link, goes to your server, gets the information from the database, and then it fills it out in Redis. So the next time somebody goes to that same link, you always check Redis first, and if it's in Redis, you get the information from there because it's way faster than databases.
Instead of making the whole
But there's a timeout. For instance, everything in Redis expires after, I don't know, you can choose yourself, or either when you run out of data, the old stuff gets cleaned up automatically. So you cannot rely on it as your database, but it's a layer in between, which is so much faster. And also it's way easier on the server than going to your database every single time. So it's really nice. I've been building this API in Django. I told you about it in Redis. Well, we're actually not going to use server database for now, but we're going to use Redis. But what it's basically going to do, I'm going to hit an endpoint from an iPhone app, and then the server is going to hit 6 endpoints from third-party APIs. 6. So because of rate limits and stuff, we don't want to do that every single time you hit that endpoint, even if it's the same one. So we store the data in Redis for like, I don't know, 30 minutes or an hour. So if you hit it again in the hour, you get all the information.
Like one hit instead of
Yeah, so it does that one hit to the 6 APIs, and then for the next hour, it's cached in Redis, which is really nice.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
And it's super fast, and it's super easy to get going.
Yeah, so the tutorial did it in Redis, and I didn't know what that was at the time because I just learned about it today. So I just copied kind of what they did, but did it with what I did. So
It's a pretty big hassle to get it set up though on your computer. Well, I remember that I had some issues, but once you get it up and running, it's super easy. Plus, Heroku supports it like fully. So if you deploy your shit to Heroku, which actually we've been doing, we moved everything away from S3 almost. Except if it's like pure static, but like we don't have like own infrastructure anymore. We are using Heroku for everything.
Heroku is sweet. I mean,
Yeah, it's great.
it's the easiest deployment thing. of all
Yeah,
time.
so there's like, and it's powered by AWS, so like there's no like less factor in like downtime or like it's not less reliable or anything. So yeah, they have.
So you just use the Redis Go plugin there, and then interface. Same thing with Mongo. So if I want that, then they got Mongo Labs plugin.
Yeah.
Nice. Look into that. That's one thing I haven't done yet. Is made an iPhone that hit
It's gonna be the first one. It's gonna be a hard one. 6 API endpoints is very hard. So we're also gonna keep polling. So it's the server is immediately returning an empty data set, and then I'm gonna poll like every 2 seconds while the server is doing its thing. We use like background workers. So the background workers go all out to all the different APIs, populate the Redis cache when they get return values, and I just keep hitting that endpoint. So I get all the fresh stuff from the Redis cache, and once I have all 6 of them, I stop it. But it's a pretty complex thing, and I need to visualize. We're in wireframing stage right now, but I need to visualize on the iPhone app like 6 incoming data streams, basically.
What's the data?
It's going to be a bunch of things. Patents, Urban Dictionary data, Google Images data, a bunch of stuff. So it's going to be interesting.
Definitely want to check it out. I've yet to make like that was my goal. Like at the end of WDI, is to set up like my own Rails or Express server, and then have my iPhone hit that.
Yeah. And yeah, I've been looking into like making a custom framework in iOS, so I can separate like all my calling to like database code into the framework. So let's say I don't know, just also nice to have it separately from the like real app because it's not really part of an app. I've been doing some research. I started yesterday, but it's really interesting. You can create a framework, for instance, let's say you're Airbnb, and you have different apps on iOS. You can share that framework in all apps. So you can, for instance, store all your brand colors and their logo assets. Once you update the framework, all your like separate Xcode projects get that automatically, which is really nice. So it's a really nice way of keeping things in sync.
Oh, it's because you touch it.
What's wrong?
I just cannot think. This thing is like, you know, this new thing is
Yeah.
crazy how it happens. On a quick and move.
So,
I just did it
Yeah, you need to be very good.
and then,
Otherwise, it's just going to
so would it be the right thing to do to
So
try?
I think your computer has this thing called force click. But if you click too hard, it's a different kind of click.
I got it. Yeah, I see.
You can turn it off though if you don't like it.
Can I do that?
Yeah, go to
I should.
I'm scared of
Only because if that fails,
the computer, just like throw it out.
you want this to work if that cars values them.
So that is an old
I wanted
Yeah.
Mac.
Yeah.
Good.
Click on part of your
Yeah, so you can put it where it's put it.
The only thing is.
Yeah.
So I tried to figure out how to do that. So with those, I unwrapped these two.
So, yeah, why don't you try that?
Yeah.
So now the goal,
So, let's see. Which one?
so the goal now is to,
I got rid of what was in it.
when I hit start,
Oh, no, I was just looking, I was reading it.
is to jump to bid.
When you hit start, you want to create a good player, bad player, which names from your text field, and a match.
So, with this type of.
So I think you have everything you need in your view controller from your storybook. So
So it's like inside this block, these.
in here,
Variables.
that's all bad.
Right.
But if you're not that storybook, go to like a full view
Install.
and see the view controller.
That's the difference between
Okay.
two. So you have to do it.
So I should do a conversation.
No, you can do it like how you have, but like how you match inside the blocks.
Thank you.
That player. Okay, and that's all I need. I don't know what are you trying to do here?
What is that function?
Make sure that it's a string, so if someone puts like a number in there,
Ah.
do it.
Oh, I have a very big announcement. Very big announcement. I figured out last night. I was so happy. So remember how we used to do guard statement, and then if not equal to empty string, there's a way to chain the two together. So let me actually. I was so happy when I discovered it. Let me create the starter project. Or not create it, open it up and actually hook that part up already. So lesson 7. So you can do, and I'm really sorry, but I need to connect my outlets because I haven't yet. But if I do connect them, so good player field. Come on, bad player field. I can't believe I forgot to mention this. I was so excited. And so, right, this would be start game of type action. And UI button. No, action. So UI button. So how do you do it? We used to do this, right? So guard let good player or player 1 name you can choose equals good player field dot text, and let player 2 name equals bad player field dot text, right? Else return. We used to do this, And then we did this exodus check saying player one name. Oh, actually, your question was something else, but we used to do player one name not equal to empty string, and then do something too, right? Which is really annoying. So you can actually do where player one name not equal to empty string, and where player two name not equal to empty string. Isn't that great? Also, for this, don't worry about what if the user enters integers and stuff. Just assume they will enter. Well, they always enter a string. Even if you enter integers, they're cast as a string. So don't worry about that. But do this check. Wrap your lines like this so it's pretty clear what you're saying. Don't have like half here and then going out there. But so my night was just perfect when I discovered this. Also, might have not been super clear, but all the remaining code is going to live in this action. You could split it up into separate functions or something, but it's basically 6 more lines right now, so it can all go into this ID action.
Technically, if you don't put the let before player two name, that's okay too, right? Because that guard let goes throughout.
I think you have to have a let here.
No, the second line.
Oh yes, absolutely. I don't know why it's the excitement, I think. Oh, it is? No, you have to. Yeah, you need to let. I'm sorry for the confusion.
I think it works like that.
And I think, well,
It's weird. It works. Maybe it's the where that goes.
I think you can now even do this.
Yeah, I don't have a let. Parentheses, comma, back parentheses.
Oh, no. Oh, and maybe it's and. No, I don't know how you would chain more of them together. Doesn't matter. Oh, that's a good point. No, but you need to create a new value though. I think that's where it starts yelling at you. Well, you can't do it all at once, I guess, right? This is already a step in a good direction.
Okay. So then after that, you're showing me.
Yeah, so this. Create 2 players, a good player and a bad player. It has an names next to it. So take a look at the player class, the good player class, the bad player class, and maybe work with
And this all happens within the same action.
your partner. Yeah, everything can happen in the same action. See if he already figured it out.
What is it taking? How do you option?
So right now, you're explaining this to.
It will just return it, so you should.
Also, guys, this last one, number 3, I don't think we've seen this yet, how to do this. So if you get all the way to here, you know who won the game. I'm already happy, man. And we'll do this one together.
This is not necessarily, it's not necessarily a range of He actually does this one. To gender
Oh, wait, I was there earlier. Oh, you don't need to do this anymore. So all of this is already in player. So player, perform random attack. Oh, so how do you? Yes, right. Good question. Yeah, so you don't need to do any of this. So sad, but I'm so sorry. It's unnecessary. So this is going to be the steps.
It seems like.
Create a good player. Create a bad player. Create a match. Start the match. And get the winner. So take a look at player, good player, bad player classes. And
So when I create
Oh, attack is very close.
this is using government classes, which is how it works. And instantiating classes.
Yeah, but then also you can see that. I still need to do something. I haven't touched this code since the whole.
I know. I just started something last week, and the thing I just showed you, but it's in very rough stages right now. And we're still like trying to figure out what we want it to be in general. Maybe it dies in a couple of weeks. No, it's pure for fun next to work.
Oh, I was getting.
The only that's like my only like hope that one day I make something that I don't even need to make money off it. Like I just want it to see reach
Go viral.
$30,000, and I'm happy, man. I can die a happy place.
You have that.
It's not really mine though. I know,
You
but
made
that's I made it. That's really true. But you know, it feels different, right? Like
yeah. Because it wasn't your idea, or you.
my name is not on it.
That's it.
That's the only thing. If my name were on it, that would have been something else.
You said all babies are.
That's what I thought.
Should be called
Yeah.
Thomas.
Yeah, let's hope not. Remove this up. Dude, these slides are like the worst. Dude, this Phil guy. So he said it again, just got me that he like wants to schedule a new observation debrief to talk about data and stuff. And like you clearly said that like you were happy with how I was teaching, like did my exit polls, or you're like, sure, like if everything was going to shit, like I get that you're so hands-on and like, but like he just emailed me again saying like we need to do a hangout within the next 2 days to talk about it. And I'm like, dude, I'm here already 3 days a week. Like it's plenty of time. Like I don't need you up my ass too about this. Like I get why they're trying to do that, but he's very persuasive.
It's kind of funny because when Tim told me that they were getting somebody, how they said like what their role would be was completely different.
There was no one for the last 2 classes, and whatever, I guess.
Can we answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
So.
Alright, so right now, this is good. You're on the good end. Let's look at the difference with what I have there.
Next, I don't know how to connect the. Start game.
I instantiate, you instantiate it too, but there's no way for you to use this.
But I don't know how to make.
So you need to
So integrated in there.
Yes, the same way to pass that variable into the match. And also save the match. Always save it into. You'll never, except for when you use a class function like we did in utilities. Otherwise, you're always going to be for of not equals. For
So, but we can, I can.
Otherwise, you're good. Yeah. So. Yeah.
That's like kind of hard.
Yeah.
Try some game again. Huh, let's stop.
And now you need to update these to the variable instances.
Why
Modify.
not it?
Yep, absolutely. So now the only things you have left to do, and so that's fine because it's saying you haven't used them yet. Or no, let's say for instance these two, and you can do it for all. You can do this because we're never going to do good player equals symbol kind of play for something. Yeah. So now the only thing you need to still figure out is look at the match class and look how you start a match and then how you get to it. Good, on a good track there.
All right, man.
Five-ish more minutes. No, well, okay, yeah. Yeah, try looking at the match class.
So do that, how do you call start match?
Did you do that? So you have your new match variable, that's what you're going to be using.
And I pass that in.
Start match. Start typing new match just to get rid of this one. New match. Oh.
For now, all we want to do is move to the console.
Yes, I'm happy with that already. But this is not going to tell you. I could have put in one function, but this is not going to tell you yet. So there's another function there to use for that. That's not.
should return, so that should return.
Go back a few backspaces. So this returns a player. So if you do bar winner equals match the winner. So no, same line, so bar winner. Or one above. So prepend it, no. Just like for let, could be let winner. And you can do, just do print. And don't do the winner itself, but do winner dot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just looking at it right now.
Yeah. So that's fine, but like just like we used to do, like let new animal equals, for instance, animal, we pass in the data we wanted to, and then we didn't really do much with it. So always we're going to assign, if you create something, for instance, a match, or we can player it to a constant, and then you call a function on it. And then, for instance, you get the winner out of it, because winner, you'll get match, returns a player. I didn't think about this, but I could have in start match returned the result here as a player. Maybe you want to, it doesn't hurt to like leave that out of start match because those are two. So I put some other ways of solving this. Okay, let's go through this together. I'm gonna not do 3 for now, then I'm gonna explain 3, and then we're gonna come back and then show how to do this for the game. But, so I already have a pretty good thing going because I have my outlets. The only thing I still need to do is when I run my app right now, it goes to the welcome screen and it doesn't go to my awesome game class or view controller. So, I fucking hate this. Come on, simulator. Who knows, who remembers how to make this go to the next screen? Perfect. So right now it doesn't do anything. As easy as just dragging with control down from the button to the whole view controller and click show, which is gonna push a new stack or a new card on top of the stack of cards we have already. So if I run again, that works. So, and just to show the guard where thing, I already hooked up my entire storyboard. So for now, I told you didn't need to necessarily do error handling. I'm just gonna do print invalid input. You could update a label here or something, but that's fine too. For this purpose, we can't like build production ready apps here all the time, or we would be losing a lot of time during these things. But let's assume we do have valid names. We need to do a couple of things. So create good player, create bad player, create instantiate a match. So same thing, right? I use create, but start the match, get the winner. My simulator is not liking it. All right. So this is a pretty interesting example because May pointed out I thought we were doing object-oriented programming, and right now we're not writing any classes anymore. And that's a good point. We're not writing any classes. I gave you all the classes, but that's part of it too, right? When you're on a team, you can't write every single class from the start to the beginning, or when we're going to be using other people's code in our code because it's sometimes really useful. You need to be able to read other people's classes and interpret them. So this is what this is about. So if I do this, holy shit, enough of space here. It says invalid input. So right, who knows how to create a good player and a bad player? In general, this is just the same thing as creating Bella or cow, and as creating a new animal on Monday with the cat or the dog. So anyone wants to guess?
Create a concept. Create a concept. For you.
Yes. So let good player. In general, the most basic thing of creating it, like we've done it in Playgrounds, is doing this, right? Good player. And it needs a name, which is player one name in my case. And that creates it. And that's very true. It will create it, but I can't use it anywhere. So I think Xcode actually yells at you for this. Result of initializer is unused. So we need to assign it to a constant or variable. So I'm going to go with a constant because I'm never going to change the value of it, except maybe the next time I run my start game, but this all gets recreated every time you hit start game. So anyone want to guess what a bad player does or how you create it? Yeah. No, not bad player field. Bad player. There we go. So player 2 name. All right. So we created 2 players. Do these lines make sense? Again, if they should by now. Take a look at the animal class or the animal thing I posted on Monday. The solution where we had the emoji cat and the emoji dog was the exact same thing. Also, right now, don't be shy to use older code that we've written on Monday or last week, because I Google 700,000 things a day, and I look at my old code too, because you can't remember all of it, and that's not necessary. So we have players. What's the next thing we need? A match. How do we create a match?
Same thing, create another concept.
So match equals type of class match. When we open up our parentheses, it tells us what it needs. Now, isn't that convenient? We just created these things. It's almost like we knew. We need a good player and a bad player. So I'm gonna hit return. Passing good player. Not the capitalized version, otherwise we're passing in the class. We need to pass in our instance bad player. Any questions so far about these 3 lines of code? Also, yell at me if I'm going too fast or typing too fast, or you're not here yet, or you have errors, because now is the time to fix them. Should I wait a little bit? We good? Good? Cool. All right, so start a match. That's easily said, right? But let's take a look what our match class actually does. So no better way than opening it. So we have a class match, has a good player and a bad player. It holds a reference, and that's only internally. We don't need this, but it holds a reference to who is the next player that gets to take his round or her round in our game. The initializer we just used, so we know that there's an initializer that accepts a good player and a bad player. It assigns these values to the class. So we have 2 more things we didn't talk about yet. Also, quick tip. You can see everything from a class when you hit the last thing here. So it says class match, property good player, property bad player, property player that gets to play. And then there's 3 methods in it, start match and winner. And I can actually click them and it will jump to that line in my code. See, it highlighted start match. It's very hard to see probably on the projection. So, start match. I have to admit, I could have written some code about the function, or some comments to what it does, but it starts match basically. And you don't need to worry about the implementation necessarily. So let's just start by calling this start match method. So I can do match dot start match. Let's just run what we have right now. Continue. Ta-da. So the match just started and finished, and it says good players left with -2 health left. There's 2 times left in this time statement. Not a good thing. But so good player died is -0, so bad player won in this case. Now, how do we figure that out though? We can see it in the print console. But there's another function on match that is called winner, I think.
So we can do let winner equals winner, right? So, and if we do print, we can do winner and see that we get access to all the properties from the player class. We get a name, we get is good boolean, which is really interesting because we might want to use this so we know what screen to present. We have it is alive, we have its health and the attacks and perform an attack, but we don't need to. So I'm going to do print. So winner.name just won the game and has winner.health left. So if I do Andre just won and has 54 health left, well, it's really depressing for me. Then you try. But so the only thing this winner function does, it returns the player that just won the game. So the match already knows at this point. You might think, this is a lot of code. Like, is it guaranteed that this finished already when you call this winner thing? And the answer is yes. So it goes in, it starts the match, it keeps going until somebody dies, then only returns here and goes to the next line. So you're 100%. If you would do something in start match that takes 10 seconds, this will not happen for 10 seconds. But I mean, the print statements in a while loop are very fast, so it's not a problem in this case. Yeah.
Remind me why you're able to get that name through winner again.
So if you look at the winner function on our, so it's not a variable, it's a function on the match class. It says if the good player is alive, return the good player because the good player clearly won. Otherwise, return the bad player. So it's returning a player instance. And if we command click into player, all players have a health, name, is good, and attacks. So this is just returning a player instance, which is either going to be this guy or this guy, because that's what we passed into the match, and that's what we're extracting from it again. So a lot of back and forth here, and I know this is maybe a pretty large example, but I can't create cats every day.
So are these subclasses of superclasses, or are these just calling different classes, basically?
So good player and bad player are subclasses of player. And the only thing that differentiates them is the attacks, right? So the good player is a type of player, so it automatically has health, attack, or perform random attack, has a attacks grade, and it has an is alive function. The only thing it does is it creates 3 attacks that are good attacks and sets them to the attacks variable, which is also defined in player, but it's empty. So this is saying, and we didn't talk about arrays yet, but all you need to know is it creates an array of attacks that is empty, and we need to override that in good player. So they're unique to good player. So although in good player you don't see a name property or a health property, it is coming from the player class. All right, so and the most interesting Boolean that we have is if winner dot is good equals true, the good player won. And I'm going to show you where this is good comes from. So let's go to player. So it has this property, is good, that comes in through the initializer, right? But we never call the initializer on player. We call them on good player and bad player. So if you look at good player and bad player, which are identical except for the attack, so I'm going to look at good player. When we instantiate a good player, the only thing we need to pass is a name. And then we call super init, and I pass is good equals true.
And it's always going to be true, right? Because I'm a good player. So there's no need for me to require the same information in the initializer of a good player, because it's always going to be true. I know this is maybe slightly complex, but if we go to bad player, it is always false. So let's go through the chain again. So we start in view controller, and we create a good player, and we pass it a name. It goes to the initializer. We do super init. We pass it the name in the is good or is bad boolean, and we create their tags, but ignore the tags for now. So we call super init. That creates the player, or instantiate the remaining properties of player, and does cell.name equals name and cell.is good, which is true and false.
Did we ever use that is good property in the opening?
And so I just use it at the end. So we get the winner out of it, and then we do if winner is good equals true, the good player won, and else the bad player won. Now, did I know before I started that I would have an is good property? No, I added it at the end because I needed to know who the winner was. I knew the name of the winner, but that's not really something you can rely on to know who won necessarily. So like, I might want to go through how I created this, but it doesn't make much sense right now because we didn't talk about arrays yet. So there's some array stuff in there.
Yeah, when I named, when I created the class for the player and bad player, I didn't name them player 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I wouldn't.
Yes, you would though. Do you use my classes?
Yeah.
So you're saying that when you created them here?
Yeah, when I named them.
Okay, here's another trick, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you. You could have also done this. If winner, well, no, you can't. No, forget about it. You would think you might be able to do this. If winner equals good player that you created, which is this one, right? You're saying if the winner that I just get returned from, so on line 23 here, you would think you would be able to do this if the winner is the good player, but you need to implement some extra stuff to make these equatable in Apple's world. So you can't do this. And I thought I would be able to do this, and I wasn't, and that's when I introduced the Boolean for myself. I'm gonna fix this.
So you could use the if statement at the bottom there to then call the
Right view controller. So why did we need this if else? Because we want to eventually either show this screen or this screen. Now I am very much aware of the fact that this is maybe a slightly complex structure, but it's not too complex. If this makes no sense to you, you should try to wrap your head around it at home over the weekend, or the homework will maybe make things a little bit clearer. But I do acknowledge that there's some stuff in there that we didn't see yet, like the arrays. We didn't really use while loops yet. But the player and the good player and bad player initialization is like just animal and cow stuff. It's just a little bit more, yeah.
How do we end up linking the good player to that screen and the bad player to that?
That's what I'm going to talk about after this. So we don't know that yet.
How did you had a control shortcut where you click on it to see what class it
Command.
comes from?
So you can click on any function or any property or any class in general, and it will take you there using commands, which is really useful, and you should be using that.
And how do you search within the
Command Shift O. All right, I'm gonna take a break now till 8:30. We have a bunch of stuff to cover, and we only have an hour, so this is gonna be very challenging. But we love a good challenge. The stuff that is coming up after this is somewhat easier, especially the first 10-15 minutes. We're going to see how we can So right now we've been control dragging to show the next screen, right? This is not going to work because this is conditionally, and you cannot do that from storyboard. So you need to conditionally be able to say, if this happens, show this screen, otherwise show that screen. So it's going to be the first 15 minutes at most, and then we're going to go to table views in 45 minutes, which is going to be very interesting. But we also have next week for them. So, well, we didn't talk about racing, but take them a break.
It doesn't show me, you know how like when you type class, it populates properties?
You just open up the first one, and then
That wasn't.
yeah, it does it automatically. I still feel the skiing slightly. It did? Yeah. Nice. Yeah, man, I've been walking everywhere. I'm not biking, it's better. My bike doesn't have like the, how do you call it, on my wheel. So it looks like I shit my pants every time I ride. Yeah, it's really bad. Nice. AlertTC says that there's power outages, and it says approximately 1,358 customers are affected. I feel like that's pretty precise, not approximately. Oh, does anyone need to see the solution again? Are we good?
Should we have that ready for that?
Yes. You good?
Yes.
Thank you.
What is it?
I'm right, the same building, so I didn't have to actually, and it was really bad. I could actually walk into that building.
Yeah, it's all flooded.
Yeah.
Eric, are you get issues fixed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't tried to do it with my old man, but on this one, this is cool.
All right, cool.
I'm gonna try to do it.
Is the old one the white one? Wish you best of luck, man.
I know it's just too big, bro.
That's gonna be very painful.
I'm just trying to do it the first time. So I have a contract coming this week on Monday. It's like it's hoping that drink those fruits. I just give me another computer.
Yeah.
Stop using the loans.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to. Like if I get over that white one, just be a hair drag.
Yeah, the white one is.
It feels time.
Yeah. Is that coffee? Do we have coffee in this place? Nice. I'm gonna go.
Right around the corner is one of the stations.
There's one here too. These tables, look at it. What is this?
That's it. Just that.
I have a charger. So annoying. Like I get through a class without charging, but now I'm live streaming it, and then it kills it way faster. I also don't think. What?
Don't bring the charger.
I don't need a charger during the day. I also don't.
Your computer lasts that long?
No, we have chargers that work everywhere. Also, Neil is not watching this, so I could actually just kill this.
He's gonna watch it tomorrow. He's gonna hear that you said that.
He's alive here. Computer battery.
Don't shock me. Cool. So Josh, maybe opens on the development team in PR?
We just hired someone for testing. And we just hired someone. I don't know, they're decent amount of those. I think we're getting ready to put together something for. But for some reason, like, we have this one team in the building, and then the other team is in Israel. They work on our flagship app. It's not like we've done active development on that in like 4 years or something, but it's super weird. It's like exact opposite. It's good. And so like we'll finish comps or something, or finish prototyping, and then I'll start working on regular environment. Really good work. Yeah, they always pop up.
How's that option city?
But that's like my main project. But it's getting ready to launch at the end of March. So it's like we just a couple months ago we released a version of our site that was persistent. So it was Ajax or like our PJAX site. I wasn't really involved in that project, but I joined the team and now we made it persistent so we didn't have to go on page layer. Persist throughout the whole experience on the site. So that's been our project for like 6 months now. It's taken a while. I mean, the last time we left it for Facebook. So I kind of inherited it.
Do you even go work on Facebook? At Facebook?
Probably.
What do you do?
Thank you.
Oh, wait, the,
National Health Radio.
oh, okay. What do you do?
Product design.
So that's what you do.
Just for prototyping. I mean, I do a little bit of front-end development. I'm on the web team. So, our front-end developer, I mean, I don't know really anything about programming. But our front-end developer is in Chicago, so I help with all that stuff.
Is there a good team for it?
Not for front-end, like our whole team is like 100 users for digital. 100 team members, but my team, like our design team is only 12. And there's only one front-end developer on the team. Out of 100.
Wow.
What?
Should apply it.
No. I want to be on the team, bro.
You only have one developer at the That's insane.
One dedicated.
That's insane.
They're all in parallel.
What's the head?
Yeah, they better.
We did the entire responsive redesign of our site, our music site.
Well, sometimes I'm the only iOS developer at my company. It's not much of a difference.
Yeah, but you were crying about it every day.
Yeah, it's the worst.
That's the weird thing, because we have a file stuff.
That is really weird. Well, I guess people really like their iOS apps nowadays.
But it's something like, you know, like that, like I can see that being the most popular product versus the best.
Right, yeah, and Jarrell will
Okay. All right, guys. So we want to show those two screens, depending on who won the game, right? And so far, we've been doing segs by dragging from a button to a screen in general, right? I'm going to show this one more time as a reminder, so to say. But what we've been doing so far is, for instance, we would have a button. That's not what I want. A button. And we would do something like this, right? We would, we would control drag from one screen to the other one, from the button to the other one, and we would do present modally, for instance. So if I run my app right now, and it actually loads. When I click the button, the next screen appears modally just like a one. That is great for when you always want to do this, but there's actually more cases where you might want to do some logic first before you do this. For instance, one thing I could think about is a form. If the form is not completely filled out, you don't want to continue your user without all the required information. Or in this case, and there's actual logic happening depending on what you want to show. So this is one of these things. So I'm going to get rid of this. And we're still going to be using this control drag from a button to a screen as a sake, but we're going to mix them up a little bit now. So we just created a segue from a button to a screen, but we can create segues from screens to screens too. And you might have guessed it already, but it's also with control drag. And the way you do it is you select your view controller here by clicking at the top, and you control drag from this little circle, yellow circle, from one screen to the other screen. So it's the same thing, but not from a button, but from the screen itself. So all the other things are for now the same. So present modally, and do that. I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom screen. So again, hold down control from that little circle, go here, and also do present modally. So now you have something that looks like this, where it splits out and it shows that you have two possible options almost. It's almost visualizing what we want it to do. And that's great. But now how do we actually make the segue happen, right? They're segues, but they're not tied to an action anymore, like a button press, so we need a way to make them happen. And the easiest way to do it is when you select the segue and you go to the attributes inspector, you can give it an identifier. So I can, for instance, do show bad screen, hit return, go to the other one, and call it show good screen. Return. So now both of my segues have an identifier that I can use in my code. So this little string is really important because that string has to be exactly the same in your code, these identifiers. So if I go to my view controller now, I can do, there's a function on every view controller that Apple gives you, perform seg with identifier. You give it that same string. I already forgot what I called them. That's why I normally copy them, but I have two of them, so. Yeah, I know, but I don't think I capitalized them yet. You shouldn't capitalize them. These are not classes. So camel casing is actually, oops. No, show good screen, Jesus. All right, so show, I don't know, I lost them, but so they're back. So if I go back here, so I do show good screen, and sender is always going to be self. Doesn't really matter for now what it is, sender is going to be self. So we're the one that are, this basically means we are the view controller invoking this segue. And here we do perform seg with identifier, show back screen, and they're self. And that's it. Now we have conditional logic to show either one or the other. And so if I start a game, hopefully I win this time. Ah, Jesus. So right now it showed the right screen, and that's cool. The done button doesn't do anything yet. Well, it actually crashes. Great, even better. But so you're stuck in it for now, but it works, right? So does anyone have any questions about this? It's very similar, but you just drag from the view controller to another view controller instead from a button to a view controller. You pass in an identifier, and you do perform seg with identifier. And where does the magic perform seg with identifier come from? If you look at UI view controllers class from Apple, and you look for perform seg. So it's a method that Apple has on UI view controller. So it is always accessible because we are always subclassing UI view controller. Yes.
So now that we have all these screens up here, right? And if you wanted to drag, say, the done action all the way to, you can't do that.
Code.
So as you go through, like when you start having a lot of different screens, you start, pretty much you reduce the amount of dragging of interactivity.
No, I mean, in this case, like the done button, it's going to be 2 lines of code, basically, or 3. But segues, most of the time, visualize how you go forward through your application flow. They don't necessarily show you how to go backwards. I do think they introduced some kind of way of doing it without writing code, but I always still write my code for it. but if you feel free to research that. But in general, I like writing it in code because it's very explicit and it's how everyone used to do it and still does it. From what I've seen, I've never seen anybody do it with storyboards. So your application flow is also just like forwards, and then you go back with, well, either a back button that is given to you by the system itself, or you write like 3 lines of code that dismiss it. So let's actually do that right now.
So these are each technically syntax-wise, objects, or these are Apple's objects?
No, these are functions.
Or these are all functions?
Func perform segment identifier. So how do we get out of these? And you can see my application crashes because if you select one of these 2 view controllers, you go to the identity, well, okay. Oh, to the done button and to the actions, it has a remaining outlet. So I'm going to delete that for both of them. So click the done button and delete this dismiss send actions when you click the done button on both screens. So you're going to start fresh. And so I want to be able to dismiss modals, right? Because we've been stuck in modals for 3 weeks now. I think it's time to break out of them. So how do we do or go about that? I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to create 2 files, and we're going to copy code, which we could also do it in 1 file. But for this case, we're going to create a bad result view controller and good result view controller. So new file. So I click on my view controller, right mouse, do new file, source iOS, make sure it's iOS. I don't know if you guys also goes to Mac by default. Cocoa Touch class. And change it to be a subclass of UI view controller. So I'm going to call the first one bad result view controller. So iOS source Cocoa Touch file, subclass of UI view controller, and bad result view controller. Yes.
I don't want to throw us too far off, but at some point, when you say also create zip file, is that file that we were talking about before?
Yes.
So once you design and everything, will it create that file for you?
No, what this will do is create a bad result view controller.swift file like we've been doing all the time. It's going to create a bad result view controller.zip file. And that is instead of the storyboard. So you would make your user interface in there, but you cannot tie relations to other view controllers. All right, I'm going to hit next. Save it in my root from my project. So bad result view controller, create. And it opens it up, and do the same thing again and call it, well, no, don't do it yet. We're going to first focus on the bad results. Well, that could rather be annoying because if we always get a good result.
Yeah, because it's going to be random.
Yeah, it's random. So, all right, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to create a second view controller. And we're going to call it good result view controller. And just save it in the same location. And now for both files, get rid of everything in between the class braces. So you should see this and this. So we have a clean slate to get started from, nothing to worry about, driving into the sunset. Everyone here? All right, so let's tie them up. Does anyone remember how to tie code files to view controllers? You can.
Let's do it. So yeah, so if you open up the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then click on the yellow, and then go to the
Mm-hmm.
and then you just
Exactly. So good result view controller and bad result view controller. All right, let's start with bad result. So I'm going to select it, close my 2 sideboards because I like to have some space. And so we have this class and a view controller, and this is a UI bar button item, which is just a more advanced UI button. So it's a subclass of UI button, but this is just UI button that lives in the navigation bar. So how did I actually create this? Let me, Jesus, too many shortcuts. If I delete it and I drag out a UI bar button item, I can drag it in here and it will show this box, which means you can place it here. And iOS comes with a bunch of default ones. So system name, you can see add, edit. So if I do add, it's a plus button by default, edit, done, which is the one I want, and cancel. And I did custom actually, and I typed done here. But so iOS gives you it one, so I'm gonna use that one, but you don't have to change it if you want.
And what's the benefit of that versus just a regular button?
It's all over iOS. And you have place in your navigation bar for it. Like it's a pattern in iOS that users are used to. Like floating buttons in your view controller, sure, sometimes that's useful because you can't put everything in the navigation bar, but an edit button is always on the top left. A done button is always on the top right.
If you actually took a button and put it on there and wrote done, would it affect the same thing?
Good question. Well, so for instance, you see that the done button in iOS, so the system done button is by default bold to draw attention to it. So it does stuff like that. You could type done, but it wouldn't be bolded by default. So I think there's some accessibility advantages that Apple gives you too. So like blind people can easily find it more easily, I think. I'm not expert at accessibility in iOS. All right, so that's how we create one. Now this is just a subclass of UI button, so I can actually just drag an action to it too. So I'm going to do action. And I'm going to call this one dismiss because I want this action to dismiss the view controller. And always change your type. And I'm going to change it to a UI bar button item, which is a mouthful. And hit connect. All right, we're 90% there. We need to write one more line of code. In here, the only thing we have to type is dismiss view controller animated user auto completion. So start typing dismiss, and then it should come up and just hit return. So it asks us if we want to animate this mission. Well, sure, we want it to nicely fit, move down. And then completion, don't worry about completion, nil's for now. Well, it's actually almost always going to be nil. I don't think I've much used completion handlers in this case. Now, do the same thing for the good view control, the exact same lines of code. So that's why you could do it in one and maybe have less duplicate code, because these view controllers don't do anything, right? There's no logic to these screens. They just show and hide again. But so same thing here. Go ahead and run your code. Who's having errors with this?
And you only use dismiss when done, right? So like if it were plus, you would do a different function.
You could have a save button on the top right. If you go to your contacts, you add a new contact, you fill everything out. On the top right, it says save.
And you'd still want to dismiss
Yeah.
because you want that animation.
Yeah. The only thing when it would be a save, you would want to do something before to persist that data. But in general, modals are always going to dismiss at some point.
But if it were like a plus, then you'd have another screen, right? And then you'd want that to do a
Yeah.
portal.
Yeah.
And that would just be.
We're going to do that. Well, we might do that next week. So we will have a table view, so a list almost, and then a plus button. And on plus, something appears. We have two input fields, and then there's a done button or save button that saves that. So most of the time, in the examples that are going to come over next week, we'll have a cancel button on the left and a save button on the right. Cancel is just dismissing them, and save is also dismissing them but doing something before that. So right now, if we do one today, one from you, finally. So if I do done, it disappears again, and I can keep doing this. Yes. Jesus. And it keeps working.
Yes.
I'm throwing cows yesterday.
You keep winning, man. There we go. Isn't this delightful? We are finally out of the modals we've been pushing on ourselves for the past 3 weeks. We had one line of code. Make sense? So also keep thinking about this, but actively what is happening every time I hit start game, it creates a new player, a new game, and it starts a new match, and I get to it. So I don't need to worry about resetting anything because it creates everything from scratch every time I click that button. So that's the nice part. I could have probably taken some stuff out of the IB action, but this is the advantage. Every time you hit start game, it creates everything from scratch. Also, I love how smooth that animation is. Dude, there's so much delay on this. All right. Anyway, that's all I had to say about dismissing view controllers. Not for the data. I have plenty of more. All right. So we've shown view controllers with logic. We've hidden them. This is getting us already pretty far.
So this dismiss
Mm-hmm.
controller, how do they know which page to go back to?
So this view controller doesn't know anything about where it came from. The only thing it knows is that it got presented on the screen modally, and the only thing it does is it hides itself again. The other screen is still laying behind that, so this modal that appears doesn't have to worry about where it has to go back to. The only thing it has to worry about is removing itself from the screen, and our second game screen is still waiting like behind that. Jesus, this is the worst. Actually, turn AirPlay off again. I'm back on because I had Assimilate on the screen for like 10 minutes before that showed up. I disconnected and I did update. Okay. Hello. All right, so the only thing this does is it appears on top of the previous screen and it dismisses itself, so the previous screen is still there. Okay. Let's see what's next. View controllers. I'm not really sure why we're talking about them, but let's go over them one more time. UI view controllers are fundamental building blocks of our app. They can contain other view controllers, which is something we haven't done yet, and we probably won't be doing a lot in the coming weeks because it tends to be very confusing to people, but we might. But generally, the only thing you need to know is that a view controller manages a view. And in this case, the most out of the view controller manages the whole parent view, so the whole screen's view. But in there, you could have 7 more view controllers controlling very small parts of the screen. For instance, a good example is, if I find my app again, there's so many apps on this screen. I actually use this right here. So this whole screen is one view controller. So this is like we've been doing the whole time. But then this whole scrollable list, all the logic for that is contained in another view. And this and all of these that you swipe left and right are again, view controller. So we have a parent view controller. Let me actually draw this. But this is a really important concept because we think of view controllers as one screen, but that's not really true. So in this case, we have an outer VC. We have another VC inside of it. And then each of these that you can swipe to the left and the right are separate VCs. So there's a lot of VCs happening here. It's just an important thing. The only thing a view controller does is control a view. And a view could be very small or very big, and the default one is screen big. So it's the entire screen. And I could do all of this in one view controller, but it would get really messy. So you want to separate logic sometimes.
Is the way you do it on one view controller by having different navigation controllers or not?
No, so we didn't talk about this much yet, but everything you see on the screen is of type UI view, right? So this is a UI view, this is a UI view, this whole thing is a UI view, but this is also a UI view, and then this separate thing is also a UI view. So you can keep adding subviews to your main view controller. You can keep adding to them. There's no limit on it. So you can do all the logic in your view controllers and just add a bunch of subviews to your main outer view. So we will be doing that in the coming weeks, but we're essentially already doing it. Every time you drag out a label or a button to your view controller in your storyboard, you're adding a new child. So you have your main view, your outer one. Every time you're adding a child, a button, a label, a text field. And there's a hierarchy in these. Like you can put things on top of each other, behind each other. So, but this is basically the same thing.
You can drag a view controller into another.
No,
Oh, you can't do that.
not in storyboards. There is. There's some kind of a container view which does that, I guess, but I've never used them. You do this in code. We might do a little sneak peek in the coming weeks. It's just important that you wrap your head around that a view controller is not necessarily the entire screen, only the screen. The screen is always managed by a view controller, but it might have multiple view controllers inside of it. All right. They manage one view, which itself has subviews. So that's what I've been talking about. So they manage that outer view that might have subviews being a button, label, and text field. So UI views can contain other subviews. Didn't we show this in like one of the first weeks where you would drag out a UI view and then drop stuff in it? I think so. Might show it again very quickly. So UI views have a lot of properties. We've been using them a little bit. Transparency, position, and lots more. We already did that. I moved the slide around in the break. So we did this, add one screen and a good win and a bad one screen. What is that? Good one. Isn't it good win? No. The modal should have this dismiss button, which dismisses the modal. So we've done that. Just to show one more time what I was talking about. So the base class to show views is UI view, right? So all of these things inherit from UI view. If you look at UI label, for instance, come on, internet. Ah, nice apple. Oh. Okay. There we go. So UI label is a subclass essentially from a UI view. So the main generic UI view though is really interesting because if we drag it out, it's of this type. So I type UI view because if you type view, you see 700 things before you see the one you want. So we can drag this out, and by default they have a white background color. But I can put stuff in there. And basically, if I move the outer view, the white box, everything moves with it, right? With it, both of those things. So when we go back to the slides, that's what they mean. No, what they mean with UI view can contain other subviews. So button is a view, label is a view, and they're all contained within. Well, at first your outer view, which is your screen, and you can actually see that in your document outline. See, this whole thing is of type UIView. Then it has subviews, which is these, which has another subview, and that has subviews again. Cool?
What's the benefit of like putting those within a view set if you want something to affect all of them?
No, for instance, a good example would be when you want to, well, I showed in Dot where if you hit that button, that something would fade out and scale down, for instance. You could apply those like animations on the container view, and everything within it would scale with it instead of adding it to every single view, which would never even synchronize, right? So that's why you would want to do that. We did that. I'm gonna skip over gestures for now. We talked about the swipe gesture, which is, they're all the same. You can just drag out any gesture from the right. If you have more questions about gestures in the coming weeks, happy to answer them. But let's move on to arrays and table views, because it's pretty important. I don't think I'm going to start table views today, but I'm definitely going to start arrays. Cool. So I'm going to go over what table views do. No, I'm not going to erase. I'm going to start with arrays. If we have maybe like 5 more minutes, I'm going to briefly explain what a table view is, and then we'll put it into practice on Monday. Also, I remember I said that we were going to do homework 4 and skip 3, and I was lying because I just looked at homework 4 and we should be doing homework 3. I just wished that that was like in sync with the fact that we're in week 4 right now, but apparently we're 1 week behind on homeworks, which is really weird. But all right, arrays. So arrays are basically a ordered set of data. So arrays definitely have an order. That order is also guaranteed because there are other things in Swift that also are a set of things, but that not have a guaranteed order. They're called sets. We might talk about them, we might not. But arrays are very strict. So if you put something in the first position of an array, you can always be sure that it's always going to be in the first position unless you change that yourself. So how do you create an array? You do just like with string var array. So array is just a type, right? It's just like string, int, UIView controller, all of those things. So you do var array equals, and you give it the initial values. Now, if you want to create an empty array, there's a little bit of a different syntax, and you need to explicitly say to the compiler what values it's going to hold. Is it going to have strings in it? It's going to have ints, because an array cannot contain strings and ints, for instance. It can only contain one specific type. It could be containing 7 UIView controllers or UIViews or buttons, but it's always going to be one consistent type. It's not even going to let you compile your code if you try to add an integer to a string array. So that's not going to work. You can add stuff to an array by using append. So we're going to go to a playground immediately or right after this. And then you can count how many items there are in an array by calling count on it, which is something we will use a lot. Think about loops, for instance. You want to loop over an array. You want to do something for every single item in an array. You would use count. Oh, that's Swift 1. It's not updated yet. Good point. It should be print. So let's open up a playground. And I'm going to call it arrays. So most basic array is for students equals Eric. I guess I'm a student too right now. To Josh. I'm so sorry if I spell your name wrong, but it's after 9 o'clock. I don't think I care anymore. So let's just say we have 5 students. So we create an array from scratch by the square parentheses or the square brackets and giving it its initial values, in this case, strings. Let's say we want to add a student. We can do students.append. Okay. then you'll see that your array contains one more element than it used to on the line before. So there's no limit on the amount of data that an array can hold. It can go, I mean, I'm pretty sure if you try to enter a billion items into an array that your device might crash, but it's pretty powerful. So append allows you to add element to array. I wonder, but I think you can still do that if it's let. No, makes sense. So when you instantiate an array with the let keyword, you cannot add anything to it anymore or remove things, because you can also remove things from arrays, right? So if you define your students array with let, it's fixed. It's always going to hold these values and no other values. Cool. I'm going to change it back to var. And for instance, a good example where let is appropriate, days of the week. It would be, for instance, this. I'm not going to do anything with it because I remember, just realized I want to do something different, but Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Right? This is never going to change. So this is a good example when you could use let, because it's always going to be like this, or at least for a very long time. And if you ever have to change it, I think there's other things that you might worry about rather than updating your Swift code. Now let's see. We want to create an array of integers, but we want to start with an empty one. So we will do, for instance, grades. Our grades, well, in Belgium, grades are based from 0 to 20. So maybe here it's A, B, C, D, and E, and all of those things. But for me, they're numbers between 0 and 20. So you can't do this. So you would think, oh, I'm going to create an empty array, but it's not going to let you, well, maybe it's not going to complain, but I don't think it will let you. So you need to explicitly say what type your array is going to hold. And there's two ways of doing that. The first way is doing it like this. So you can say type int and initialize it, just like with a class with your parentheses. Or this is the same thing as doing var grades of type int equals. I like the top line more, but it doesn't matter. And I'm also not going to care if you use the bottom line or the bottom syntax. So this is not allowed. Var grades equals. You need to explicitly tell it what type it is, and that's actually pretty logical, because as I was saying, if you have an array of strings and you want to append an into it, it's not going to let you. So Swift, or the compiler, needs that data to know if you can append certain objects to an array. So even if you create it empty, it needs to know it's going to be an array of ints, so you cannot append a string to it. Objective-C used to be the Wild West. You were able to do whatever you wanted to. So Swift is getting a lot stricter on us with this. So let's say I still have this. All right, don't copy this yet. So let's say we want to add grades for, that's how we grade your homework, guys. So let's show you how we do that. We have for students in students, so a for loop. So if we do print hello students, this will print hello and all your names, so well, most of you guys. It's 6 times because we have 6 students. And it's really hard to get to see all of them, I guess. You need to open up your console. That's, oops. So it prints all your names. And so the next thing we normally do is we create a random grade for you guys. We want to have a random grade between 0 and 20. So I'm going to call this, instead of random index, I'm going to call this random grade. And then we do hello students, you scored, and then grade. Right, so it creates a random number between 0 and 20. Cool. And then we do grades dot. How do we add something? Append, and then grade. That's what we send off to Tim. That's great for your homework.
I had a question.
Yeah?
How do I make an array of different type of different types?
You can't? Well, you could, I think, if you make them any object. Would you be able to? Maybe, but it's just a bad thing to do. Does this make sense? So this is pretty cool, right? Like we can go, we loop over one array, we create a random grade for the students, and we append it to a new array. It's pretty powerful. Now, how do we can do actually more things. Let's say previous grades equals 10, 20, 19, 18, whatever. We can create a total grades that combines the two arrays by doing grades plus previous grades. And it combines the two arrays into one. So grades is the one we just created with the for loop, and then I just created a new, this could be a static array, and we just add the two together. Oops. All right. Now we get the length of an array, which is also honestly something you might be surprised of how many times you're going to use that. Print you have. Does anyone remember from the slides? How do we get the length of the students array? Students dot count. You have 6 students. That's very correct. Now, one more interesting thing, well, there's a couple more. First one, access elements from the array. How do you, for instance, take out Josh out of our students array? Well, we can do students and pass in an index. So 2 will take the third element out of the array. So the index of an array is 0 based. What does it mean? What does that mean? That if we have, for instance, Tomas, Andre, and Josh, then is this element 0, 1, and 2. So although the count of the array is 3, because there's 3 elements in there, the array is always going to be 0 based. So it's, and the first item is always going to be 0. That's in about every computer programming language. Also with days on the calendar on iOS, the first day is the 0, not the
So almost everything in programming is in 0-based. Now, you might wonder what happens if I try to access index 3 from this array. Well, shit will happen. You don't want to do that. It'll actually crash your application and stuff like that. So you need to be very sure if you access an element from an array that that index is even accessible, that you have that position in your array. So just by using the square brackets, you get that element out of the array. So for instance, when we would write a normal for loop, so we did for student in students, which is the nicest one, I admit, but there's also the normal for loop. So for I equals 0, I equal smaller than students.count, I plus plus. So what we do is we say, instead of saying for I equals 0 until I is smaller than 6, we do that dynamically by passing in students.count, which is going to be 6 in this case. And we increase I every time. So we do, for instance, index I is students, and we do students I. So it's going to print index 0 is student Eric, index 1 is student Thomas, index 2 is student Josh, and so on. So this is a very common thing because you might want to have access to that I variable a lot. Like for student in students reads nicer, of course, but you don't have access immediately in that loop to what index that student is at, which is a very valuable piece of information. Now think about your contacts application. All that is, and we're going to combine arrays with table views next week, but all that thing is doing is just looping over an array of contacts on your phone and displaying them on the screen for each cell. So table views and arrays go hand in hand. It's insane how closely tied they are together. You'll see that next week. So that's not about it, but that's already like a lot of fun stuff we can do with arrays. Now we can also remove things from arrays. So for instance, students, remove at index, will delete Eric out of the array of students. And very interestingly, if I type this again, you see what it returns? It returns a string. So it will actually give you the element that it just removed. So if I do var just removed students, you don't need to do this if you don't care about that information, but you can access it. We'll print Eric. So if you just care about removing it, there's no real reason to store it, but it is really useful if you want to get access to the piece of information you just deleted for some reason. And there's more of those. Remove range. I don't even know how to use this one. I'm going to take a guess. I actually deleted a lot of students, more than I anticipated. Oh, yeah. Wait, who's left? May. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So wait, let's take a look here. So we do students before we remove anyone. We have Eric, Thomas, Josh, May, David, and Andre, right? Then we remove Eric, so it's Thomas, Josh, May, David, and Andre. And then we remove the first two, so going from 0 to including 1. So who's left? That's May, David, and Andre. So you can delete a range of objects, just like we've been doing with loops, the 0, ... syntax. You can
enter that. Let's say you want to delete the last two, you could do that.
If you want to delete multiple people at once, could you do students that remove at index 0, 1?
You need a range. So this is deleting 2 students at 1.
But what if you want to do like 1 and 4? You got to do it separate. Or could you do 1, 4, 6?
That's an interesting problem. So more advanced array methods give you the option to pass a set of indexes you want to remove, but they're not on Swift arrays. So Swift arrays is one thing. There's also NS arrays, which are lower level, and those have those crazier methods. So you would convert your Swift array to a NS array, and then apply those methods to remove the indexes you want to remove, and convert it back to an array. But it's definitely not the most easy thing to do. It's also a very, well, not very, but it's a pretty uncommon thing to do, because when you think about, for instance, your contacts app, you can swipe left on a cell and it will show a delete button. And even if you go to edit and then you have all the delete icons on the left, it still is 1 by 1, right? Have you noticed that? Like all the deletion almost happens 1 by 1. I think mail is an exception where you can pick several messages and delete, but it's definitely possible, but not on Swift arrays. Just like string, by the way, that's a very, I didn't talk about this at all. String is powerful, but that's a Swift thing. The whole framework itself almost relies on NS string, which is more powerful than string, but is also working less nicely with Swift because, for instance, a string, well, string is maybe a bad example, but an array, you couldn't add certain things. If it's a string array, you can add an integer, but with NS arrays, you're in the Wild West again, you're in Objective-C land. So these are almost like pseudo types. They're not really, but the whole framework itself is not relying on Swift arrays and Swift strings yet, because they're still Objective-C, which is still fully supported in Cocoa Touch. Any questions about arrays so far? All right, let's use our struct knowledge again. How do we create a animal struct? Does anyone remember? So let's give it a name property, type string, h property of type int. How to spell giraffe? How do we create an animal? Same thing as classes. So, and reminder that structs give us a nice initializer for free, so that's why I like to use them in cases. What is the name of our giraffe? Boo Boo. Jeff, I like that. Jeff is already pretty old. He's 21 years old. And then let's create a ground pig. Is that a thing? It is now. I don't know. His name is Jewel. He's 3 years old. Let's say I created my private zoo at home. I have zoo animals equals my giraffe, ground pig. Oh, yeah. So arrays of structs are also a thing. And again, if you hold down Option and you click on, not on giraffe, but on zoo animals, you'll see that zoo animals is an array of type animal. So they hold only structs, and it actually prints really nicely to the console too. So the reason why I wanted to show this is in a very common thing is we're going to use a for loop again instead of for in, but right here we immediately had access. sometimes you need to do one more step. So for instance, for var, I'm going to use chafe to be sure. I think I should work again. Let's try it. I equals 0. I smaller than zoo animals count. I plus plus. Good, it allows me. So you could do, this is my zoo animal. Pass in the name. So this is where it gets interesting because we're going a little bit deeper now. We have a structure, so you could do zoo animals. So you can actually do it like that. So this is my zoo animal, Jeff and Jewel. But there's also nothing stopping you from, and that, I like doing that a lot. So I would create let animal equals zoo animals, just pass in I, and I can just do animal.name here. It's a little bit nicer in my opinion. So first you create a constant animal that takes the right animal out of the array using the I, so using an index, and then you can just do, this is my zoo animal and an animal.name. It's a very common thing to create this like in between constants that stores that one value out of the array, and then you use it. And as a final command to the class, we're not gonna kill them. We're just gonna remove them. We sold them. We empty an entire array by calling remove all of them. Oh, and it's a let, so I should make it a var. Otherwise, I cannot remove them. Can you get started with refresh array? That's all I have for today. Well, I have a bunch more, but we're going to keep it for Monday.
What would you use? You actually want to do everything?
I could think of, for instance, when you have a table view with all the news articles, for instance, and you pull down to refresh, and you want to go out to the network and get all the latest ones, you could remove all the articles. Then once you get something back from the network, populate them again.
So it would be remove all, and then you would append all of the.
Well, so it would come back as an array from the network. Well, yeah, you could do append. Well, in general, you won't even use remove all because you would have vars, articles is an array of articles, and then if you refresh, you would just do articles equals the array that comes from the network. But remove all is sometimes useful. I just want to show you some methods on the array right now.
Maybe it's something to be wrong. Honestly, delete everything in your trash. So,
For instance, yeah. If I do arrays, there's a bunch more. So they have this collections doc that talks about arrays and also about dictionaries, which we haven't used yet. So here you clearly see array has a set, like a set of indexes that is never going to change. Set is very all over the place. It can change. And then dictionaries we didn't talk about yet, but we're going to talk about those next week, I think. So creating empty arrays, creating an array by adding two arrays together. There's a bunch more stuff we can do with arrays, but we'll get there. We will get there. So iterating. Yeah, we covered most of it. So that's it for today.
When you said let animal people know, so that's in every step.
Yes, for every iteration. So if there's 1,000 times, it will create let animal 1,000 times and assign the right value to it.
So you could let the same animal even though it's a constant.
This, every time this loop happens, so this will happen in this case 2 times, this gets created from scratch. So the previous one doesn't exist anymore. So that's the concept of a loop. Everything in the loop is only living for as long as the loop is living. And the next iteration, it completely starts from scratch. So we actually did a lot today, a lot of different things. Some OOP stuff again, segues, Dismissing view controllers and arrays. Next week is going to be all table views and dictionaries probably. So homework 3 due on Sunday. Office hours this weekend.
Saturday, I will be here at
Let Andre know by Friday night if you plan on attending, so he doesn't wait around for no one that is not coming.
yeah, just like also I'm always available always on Slack, so you guys already know that.
Yep. If you have questions, don't hesitate about homework or about anything else.
It's class.
7.
Also,
We missed President's Weekend. President's Day.
what is?
Exit surveys. So I feel like people are filling them out less and less. I will take that as a happy, because if you have issues or problems with this class, you are supposed to fill them out. Otherwise, I cannot know about them. So if you have a second to fill them out, and especially if you want something to be different or slower, or well, the thing is, I'm going to be very honest. I can't go much slower than I've been going right now. There's so much we have to cover. And I know we put a lot of stuff into one class, but there's no way I can go slow. Well, I could, but that would mean, and if that's what it takes, sure, but that would mean that we wouldn't be able to cover everything we wanted to cover. But anything else, I mean, even if you think it's too fast, put it in there. If a lot of people think it, that's my only way of knowing. If anything else is bothering you, write it down. And I guess that's it. Next week is going to be super exciting. Table views are the shit.
Could you upload the class functions?
Yes. Oh yeah, we did class functions too today. See, so many things. Forgot
Why
about
do you
it.
upload those? Do they go into solutions? Or do they go
Yes,
into
all of it goes into solutions. Let me actually do that right now. So the solutions for the game are in here already. So arrays. Hey, what is my playground to playground? See, this is not a good thing. You need to. Oh, this is the class functions. If you want to practice your object-oriented programming skills, take a look at the very basic cat dog example of Monday. I know the game is a little bit, there's a lot going on. But what we did on Monday with like creating a new cat, a new dog, and getting the description of it should be really good by next week. Next week is going to be less OOPE. Is that a thing? It's going to be less focused. We're not going to focus as much on object-oriented stuff anymore. We're just going to more or less assume that we've covered it. And I mean, I'm happy to explain it all over again, but yeah, take a look at the cat and dog example if it doesn't ring a bell yet. Yes. Yes.
Are you being officer this weekend?
Andre is doing them this weekend. So Saturday. Yeah, thank you. And did anything great? So. No, I'm trying to push it up to GitHub now, so if it does great, we at least have something that goes to GitHub. Yeah.
So all the solutions are on GitHub anyway. So under solutions, lesson 7, so if anything. I'm not sure that you do. The problem is fixing conflicts in a code file is really easy because it shows you get to here was this one and forget to here was this one. The problem is that fixing conflicts in your Xcode specific files like your main story reports and for instance, it's impossible to read. So if you look at game starter, this is file 2. For instance, this is for story version. This doesn't make any sense, right? So if there's a comment here that you too, bye.